What if Rick Sanchez came into Warhammer 40,000? Surrounded by towering cathedrals of machinery, the multiverse's most brilliant mind stares into the soulless eyes of tech priests who mistake his genius for divinity. Incense and oil fill his lungs as the grinding of ancient gears drowns out his cynical laughter. The Adeptus Mechanicus hunger for his knowledge, while the Inquisition demands his head. In a galaxy where science is religion and curiosity is heresy, can even Rick's intellect survive when the very laws of reality bow to gods that should not exist? The portal tore open with a sickly green glow, spitting crackling energy across the ancient metal floor of Forge World Riser. Sparks cascaded from exposed circuitry in the ceiling as the breach in reality stabilized, widening into a perfect circle that hummed with impossible technology. Through the dimensional tear stumbled an elderly man, white hair wild and unkempt, lab coat stained with substances unknown to Imperial taxonomy. He collapsed to his knees, one hand clutching a strange device, the other gripping a half-empty flask. Well, that could have gone better, Rick Sanchez muttered, wiping spittle from his chin as his portal gun sparked and fizzled in his grip. The device had never malfunctioned this catastrophically before. The coordinates were scrambled beyond recognition, quantum entanglement completely severed from his home dimension. Whatever pocket of the multiverse he had landed in, it was far beyond his usual travel routes. Rick staggered to his feet, squinting at the vast cathedral-like chamber around him. Red emergency lumens cast everything in a bloody glow. The architecture was impossible, a grotesque mixture of industrial functionality and religious reverence. Massive pistons pumped like mechanical hearts, while incense burners hung from chains, filling the air with choking fumes. Servitors, more machine than human, shuffled past without acknowledging his presence, their augmented bodies, performing rote tasks with mindless efficiency. Great, another theocracy, Rick grumbled, taking a swig from his flask. Just what the multiverse needed. More gods and more idiots worshipping them. A klaxon suddenly blared, echoing through the vast chamber. Rick tensed, shoving the malfunctioning portal gun into his lab coat. Whatever this place was, he needed to understand it before attempting repairs. That meant finding a power source compatible with his tech, and more importantly, avoiding whatever passed for authority in this twisted mechanical cathedral. The massive doors at the far end of the chamber groaned open. Red-robed figures entered, moving with deliberate, synchronized steps. Their faces were hidden behind elaborate respirator masks, and mechadendrites whipped from their backs like metallic tentacles. At their center walked a towering figure whose body was more machine than flesh, an ornate staff crackling with unknown energies clutched in a mechanical hand. Magos Drespian, one of the red-robed figures intoned, pointing at Rick. The Auspex detected a Xenos energy signature. The intruder materialized from nowhere. The central figure, Magos Drespian, stepped forward. His voice emerged as a burst of binary code before translating into Gothic through a vocalizer in his throat. Contain the anomaly. I sense technology of great potency. The Omnissiah has delivered us a gift to be studied. Rick sighed, recognizing the familiar pattern of religious zealots who mistook science for divinity. He had dealt with similar cultures across countless dimensions. But as the red-robed figures advanced, something in their augmented movements and the strange blend of technology and ritual struck him as uniquely dangerous. "Hey, robo-priests," Rick called out, adopting his most disarming tone. "Look, clearly there has been a mistake. I am just a traveler passing through your, lovely mechanical monastery or whatever. Just point me to your nearest power source and I will be out of your circuits before you can say praise the, what did you call it? The Omni whatever." The Magos raised a mechanical hand, and his followers halted. A scanning beam projected from his eyes, washing over Rick in a grid pattern. "The anomaly possesses technology of unknown origin, possible archaeotech of the highest order. Secure him. We shall perform the ritual of disassembly to determine the extent of his knowledge." Rick recognized the threat instantly. These were not simple religious zealots, but something far more dangerous. They were technological fundamentalists, and they had just identified him as a heretical treasure trove. "Yeah, hard pass on the disassembly," Rick said, backing toward a service corridor. "I have been disassembled before, and it is not an experience I am looking to repeat." With practiced sleight of hand, Rick pulled a small device from his pocket, nothing more than a jury-rigged remote control. He had built it from parts scavenged from a dozen dimensions, a universal override that could hijack most primitive electronic systems. As the red-robed tech priests advanced, Rick pointed it at the nearest servitor and pressed the central button. The cyborg creature froze, then convulsed as Rick's device bypassed its control systems. With a mechanical shriek, it turned on the nearest tech priest, metal hands closing around the red-robed figure's throat. Chaos erupted as more servitors fell under Rick's control, their programming corrupted by his improvised device. "Heresy," Magos Drespian thundered, his staff discharging a blast of energy that narrowly missed Rick's head. "The stranger perverts the sacred tools of the Omnissiah. Purge the corruption." Rick used the confusion to sprint down the service corridor, followed by the sounds of gunfire and mechanical screams. His mind raced with calculations and observations. The level of technology here was advanced but stagnant, as if progress had been deliberately halted and codified into ritual. More concerning was the religious fanaticism applied to machinery, a perversion of science that made his skin crawl. Whatever dimension this was, Rick knew one thing for certain. He needed to repair his portal gun and escape before these mechanical zealots tore him apart in the name of their machine god. The service corridor opened into a vast manufacturing floor where thousands of tech adepts labored at assembly lines, constructing weapons of terrifying, destructive potential. Rick's scientific mind instantly catalogued what he was seeing: lasers that could vaporize buildings, vehicles capable of leveling cities, and ammunition designed to penetrate the heaviest armor. This was a civilization built for perpetual warfare, industry dedicated solely to destruction. Okay, so not just religious nuts, but militaristic religious nuts with a fetish for giant guns, Rick muttered, ducking behind a massive cogwheel as alarm klaxons began to sound throughout the facility. This dimension just gets better and better. The Magos' voice boomed through voxcasters across the manufacturing floor. "Attention all servants of the Omnissiah. A technological heretic has infiltrated our sacred forge. He carries forbidden knowledge and has corrupted the blessed servitors. In the name of the machine god, he must be captured and his secrets extracted for the glory of Mars." Tech priests began sweeping through the facility, scanning for Rick's energy signature. Servitors moved in coordinated patterns, searching every possible hiding place. Rick realized that stealth would not save him. In a facility this vast, with so many eyes both human and mechanical, discovery was inevitable. What he needed was leverage. Rick analyzed the forge world around him with cold, calculating precision. These tech priests worshipped machinery and knowledge. Their entire society appeared to be built around the acquisition and preservation of technology, and most importantly, they clearly believed in a divine force behind their scientific understanding, this Omnissiah they kept invoking. A cruel smile twisted Rick's lips. If there was one thing he excelled at beyond his scientific genius, it was destroying people's faith. Rick slipped from his hiding place and approached a cogitator terminal. The machine was ancient, a hybrid of advanced technology and Baroque ornamentation that offended Rick's sensibilities. Religious iconography should never be mixed with functional technology. It was inefficient and idiotic. The terminal was protected by several layers of security, including what appeared to be prayers encoded into the activation sequence. Rick scoffed, bypassing the primitive protections with a few keystrokes and a small device pulled from his pocket. Within moments, he had accessed the Forge world's central database and communication systems. What he discovered sent a chill even through his jaded consciousness. This wasn't just another dimension. This was humanity's future, thousands of years ahead of his own timeline, where mankind had spread across the galaxy but fallen into a dark age of superstition and endless war. The Imperium of Man, they called themselves. An empire spanning countless worlds, united by hatred of the alien, the mutant, and the heretic. And Rick Sanchez, with his dimensional technology and disregard for their machine god, qualified as all three. Great, I landed in the worst possible future timeline. Rick grumbled, downloading critical information about this universe into a small data device. And I thought the Citadel of Ricks was bureaucratic. These idiots turned the entire galaxy into a fascist theocracy. The data confirmed his suspicions. The Adeptus Mechanicus, as these tech priests called themselves, were guardians of technology in a society that had lost the ability to innovate. They preserved ancient knowledge without understanding it, wrapping science in ritual and dogma until the two were inseparable. And most damning, of all, they reserved the highest reverence for something called standard template constructs, the pinnacle of human achievement from a forgotten golden age. Rick's eyes narrowed as a plan formed in his mind. He had no intention of being dissected by religious fanatics, but he also couldn't resist the urge to shatter their delusions before escaping. If they wanted to worship machines, he would show them what true technological mastery looked like. The portal gun was damaged but not beyond repair. Rick could see that now. The dimensional calibrator was misaligned, and the quantum field generator needed recalibration. But the parts required were specialized, impossible to fabricate without proper equipment. He would need access to the Forge world's most advanced laboratories. And for that, he would need to become what these tech priests desired most, a prophet bearing sacred knowledge. Rick activated the Forge world's Vox system, his voice echoing through every speaker and cogitator terminal in the facility. Attention all members of the Adeptus Mechanicus. This is, Magos Rick, dimensional traveler and bearer of lost standard template constructs. I have come to share the greatest technological revelation with your Forge world. Bring me to your holiest manufacturing center, and I will demonstrate technology that will make your Omnissiah weep tears of sacred oil. It was a gamble, but one calculated to appeal to the Mechanicus' obsession with lost technology. Rick knew zealots of all types shared one common weakness: the promise of validation for their most cherished beliefs. The response was immediate. The alarms ceased, replaced by a hushed silence that spread across the facility. Then, the heavy footfalls of the Magos approached, each step causing the floor to tremor slightly. Identify yourself and the nature of your standard template construct. Magos Drespian's voice boomed from just outside Rick's hiding place. Prove your claim or face immediate termination. Rick stepped out from behind the terminal, hands raised in a gesture of peace that he had never once meant sincerely in his long life. The name is Rick Sanchez, dimensional traveler and, let us just say, the smartest man in any universe I happen to visit. As for my STC, well, it is not exactly what you guys classify as an STC, but trust me, it makes your ancient relics look like children's toys. Rick pulled out his damaged portal gun, holding it up like a holy relic. This device tears holes in the fabric of reality itself, allowing instantaneous travel between dimensions. No warp travel, no Geller fields, none of that nonsense. Pure science that even your Omnissiah never mastered. The Magos and his attendant tech priests froze, their augmented eyes focusing on the portal gun with an intensity that bordered on religious ecstasy. Mechadendrites twitched with barely contained excitement. The Omnissiah provides, Magos Drespian whispered, his vocalizer dropping to a reverent tone. A traveler from beyond the materium, bearing technology unknown even to Mars. This is a sign. Rick suppressed a smirk. He had them exactly where he wanted them. Yeah, a real miracle. Now, I need access to your best equipment to repair this thing and demonstrate its full capabilities. Unless you would rather report to your superiors that you turned away the greatest technological discovery since, well, ever. The Magos conferred with his acolytes in rapid binary, a language that Rick understood perfectly despite never having encountered it before. The debate was heated, some arguing that Rick was clearly a heretic, while others insisted that the potential knowledge was too valuable to discard. Finally, Magos Drespian turned back to Rick. You will be escorted to the Sanctum Machina, the holiest laboratory in our forge. There you will repair your device under our supervision and demonstrate its function. If you speak falsely, the penalty is death by rendering into base and components. Rick shrugged. Sure, whatever floats your mechanical boat. Just lead the way and keep the religious mumbo-jumbo to a minimum. I work better without people chanting around me. As they led him deeper into the heart of the forge world, Rick observed everything with calculating eyes. The Mechanicus had technology that, while primitive compared to his own creations, contained elements he had never encountered before. Particularly interesting was their use of something they called machine spirits, a concept that blended artificial intelligence with superstitious animism. The Sanctum Machina was a massive domed chamber, filled with technology both recognizable and utterly alien to Rick. Cogitators the size of buildings hummed alongside devices that manipulated matter at the quantum level. Tech priests moved in carefully choreographed patterns, performing maintenance rites that were part engineering and part religious ceremony. Okay, I am going to need access to a quantum stabilizer, an atomic resequencer, and whatever passes for a decent power source in this place, Rick announced, surveying the equipment available. And for the love of whatever gods you people worship, some privacy would be nice. The sacred rituals must be observed, the Magos insisted. No technology may be operated without proper veneration of the machine spirits. Rick rolled his eyes. Fine. You pray, I will work. Just try to keep the religious ecstasy to a dull roar. As the tech priests began their rituals, Rick set to work repairing his portal gun. He worked with practiced efficiency, his fingers dancing across components with the precision of a concert pianist. The Mechanicus watched in awe as he casually violated a dozen of their most sacred technological precepts, handling machine spirits with casual disregard while achieving results that their most skilled engineer could never manage. Hours passed as Rick repaired the dimensional calibrator and reconfigured the quantum field generator. The portal gun was nearly operational, lacking only a suitable power source to replace the one drained during his unexpected journey. Almost there, Rick announced, examining the nearly repaired device. Now I just need something with enough juice to power this baby up. Something like, oh, I do not know, whatever is powering this entire facility. The Magos recoiled in horror. The forge heart is sacred. No outsider may access the plasma reactors that sustain our holy work. Rick sighed dramatically. Look, I am not asking to take it home with me. I just need to borrow some power for a demonstration. Unless you would rather explain to your fabricator general or whoever runs this mechanical circus that you had the chance to witness interdimensional travel technology and chickened out. The appeal to pride and curiosity worked. Exactly as Rick had anticipated. After another round of binary debate, the Magos reluctantly agreed to allow Rick access to one of the secondary plasma reactors, under heavy guard and with strict limitations. The reactor chamber was a cathedral to nuclear power, plasma contained within magnetic fields glowing with the intensity of a captive sun. Engineers tended to the reactor like priests at an altar, monitoring its output while singing binary hymns to appease its machine spirit. This is what I am talking about, Rick said, approaching the reactor control systems. Now stand back and prepare to have your mechanical minds blown. With quick, confident movements, Rick connected his portal gun to the plasma reactor's output systems, bypassing safety protocols and religious circuit breakers with casual ease. The tech priests gasped in horror as he violated their most sacred operational codes, but none dared interrupt as the portal gun began to glow with power. Ladies, gentlemen, and whatever gender you assign to your toasters, prepare for the demonstration of a lifetime, Rick announced, raising the fully charged portal gun. Interdimensional travel without all that messy warp business you seem so fond of. Rick pulled the trigger, and a swirling green portal opened in the center of the reactor chamber. Through its glowing circumference, the tech priests could see another world entirely, a verdant forest untouched by industry or war. The sight was so alien to their forge world existence that several of the younger adepts fell to their knees in religious rapture. Impossible, Magos Drespian whispered. Travel without the warp? Without Geller fields or navigators? The Omnissiah never spoke of such technology. Yeah, about your Omnissiah, Rick said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. I have got some bad news for you, gearheads. If your machine god was so all-knowing, how come he never figured this out? Pretty basic interdimensional physics, really. A first-year student in my dimension could understand the principles. The blasphemy hung in the air like a physical force. The tech priests froze, their augmented minds struggling to process the theological implications of Rick's casual dismissal of their deepest-held beliefs. You lie, the Magos finally responded, his voice quivering with rage. The Omnissiah is the source of all technological wisdom. This device must be an extension of his divine plan, unknown to us until now. Rick laughed, the sound echoing harshly through the reactor chamber. Nice try. But here is the thing about gods. They are just advanced aliens or interdimensional beings that primitive societies worship because they cannot understand the science. Trust me, I have met dozens of so-called gods across the multiverse. They all bleed. They all die. And not one of them is worthy of worship. He gestured to the portal, still showing the pristine forest. Your entire religion is based on the worship of technology you no longer understand. You are cargo cultists in fancy robes, performing rituals that have nothing to do with how the machinery actually functions. And the saddest part? The knowledge you have lost is basic compared to what I carry in my head. The Magos stepped forward, his augmented body trembling with religious fury. Enough! Your blasphemy will not be tolerated. Guards, seize this heretic and prepare him for mind extraction. His knowledge will serve the Omnissiah, whether he wills it or not. Rick had anticipated this reaction. The portal gun was fully functional now, and with a quick adjustment, he changed the destination coordinates. The serene forest vanished, replaced by a swirling interdimensional void filled with shapes that hurt the human mind to perceive. I would not do that if I were you, Rick warned, his finger hovering over the trigger. This portal is currently set to release energy from a dimension where the laws of physics work differently. One squeeze, and I flood this entire chamber with radiation that will fry every circuit and implant in your cyborg bodies. Your precious machine spirits will not survive the exposure. The threat gave the tech priests pause. The Magos calculated the potential risk, his augmented brain running through probabilities and theological implications at lightning speed. What do you want, heretic? The Magos finally asked. Rick smiled. This was the moment he had been working toward. What I want is simple. I want to show your entire Forge world the truth. Hook me up to your Vox network. Let me broadcast to every cogitator and data terminal in this facility. Let your tech priests and servitors hear what I have to say, and then I will leave peacefully through my portal, never to return to your dreary, war-obsessed dimension. It was a dangerous gamble. The Mechanicus valued knowledge above all else, but they also zealously guarded their theological dogmas. The promise of heretical knowledge would be tempting, but the threat to their faith might outweigh curiosity. And if we refuse? The Magos asked. Rick shrugged. Then I release enough interdimensional energy to turn this reactor into a smoking crater, taking a significant chunk of your Forge world with it. I die, you die, everybody dies, and nobody learns anything. Seems like a waste, does it not? The Magos conferred with his acolytes once more, their binary language flowing in rapid bursts. Rick waited patiently, the portal gun held steady in his hand. He had faced death too many times, across too many dimensions to fear it now. If these mechanical zealots chose destruction over truth, so be it. He would simply be proving his point about religious fanaticism in the most dramatic way possible. Finally, the Magos turned back to Rick. You will have your audience, heretic. But know this. Whatever damage your words cause, the Mechanicus will survive. Faith in the Omnissiah has endured for 10,000 years. It will not be undone by one-dimensional traveler, Rick snorted. Yeah, we will see about that. Within the hour, Rick stood before a vox-cast system that would transmit his words and images to every corner of Forge World Riser. Thousands of tech priests, engine seers, Skitarii warriors, and servitors would hear his message. The potential for chaos was enormous, exactly as Rick intended. "Citizens of the Adeptus Mechanicus," Rick began, his voice carrying across the Forge world. "My name is Rick Sanchez, interdimensional traveler and the smartest being you will ever encounter. Today I am going to tell you something your leaders do not want you to hear. The truth about your omnissiah, your technology, and the prison of ignorance you have built around yourselves." Rick held up his portal gun, projecting its schematics onto the voxcast for all to see. "This device allows travel between dimensions without using your warp. No risk of daemon incursion, no need for Geller fields or navigators. Just pure science that your ancestors once understood before they decided that thinking was too hard and ritual was easier." He proceeded to explain the principles behind the portal gun in the clear, simple terms, deliberately stripping away the mystery that the Mechanicus wrapped around all technology. He demonstrated how the quantum field interacted with space-time, how the dimensional calibrator selected destinations, all concepts that were within the theoretical understanding of the Mechanicus, but had been buried beneath millennia of religious obfuscation. "Your standard template constructs, those relics you worship, they are just instruction manuals created by people who understood the science. There is nothing divine about them, the machine spirits you revere. Simply primitive artificial intelligences designed to regulate systems automatically. You have turned maintenance procedures into religious ceremonies, mistaking correlation for causation when your rituals appear to appease these machine spirits." As Rick spoke, alarms began to sound throughout the Forge world. Reports flooded in of tech priests removing their sacred implants, of engine seers questioning religious protocols, of entire manufacturing lines grinding to a halt as workers debated the theological implications of Rick's revelations. Magos Drespian stepped forward, attempting to cut the voxcast. "Enough. Your heresy spreads like a virus through our sacred forge. This ends now." Rick was ready for this. With a quick twist of the portal gun's settings, he opened a small portal directly into the voxcast system's power supply, bypassing the Magos' attempt to silence him. "See that?" Rick said, his voice still broadcasting across the Forge world. "That is what real technological mastery looks like. Not prayers to machine spirits, not ritualistic button pressing, but understanding the fundamental principles and bending them to your will." He turned to face the assembled tech priests directly. "You want to know the real tragedy? Humanity in this timeline had the potential for greatness. Your dark age of technology was just the beginning of what you could have achieved. But then you got scared. You saw the dangers of artificial intelligence, of unregulated technological development, and instead of finding a balance, you retreated into superstition and fear." Rick's voice grew more passionate, his usual cynicism giving way to genuine contempt for the waste of potential he saw before him. "You could be gods by now. Not the false gods you worship, but beings of such technological advancement that no force in this galaxy could threaten you. Instead, you fight endless wars with weapons you barely understand, against enemies that exploit the gaps in your knowledge." The Magos finally managed to cut the power to the voxcast system, but the damage was done. Throughout the Forge world, the seeds of doubt had been planted. Centuries of unquestioning faith were being re-examined in light of Rick's revelations. "You have doomed us all," Magos Drespian said, his mechanical voice flat with despair. "Without faith in the Omnissiah, the Mechanicus cannot function. Doubt is the first step toward tech heresy, and tech heresy leads to abominations that could destroy humanity itself." Rick scoffed. "Oh, please. That is what every religious leader says when their control is threatened. Without blind faith in our dogma, society will collapse into chaos. It is the last refuge of those who cannot defend their beliefs with reason." The Magos raised his staff, energy crackling along its length. "You have left us no choice, heretic. You must be destroyed, and all who heard your words must undergo memory purging. The damage must be contained before it spreads beyond Riser." Rick raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, good luck with that. You cannot unring this bell, Magos. The truth is out there now, spreading through your forge world like a virus. And here is the best part. Even if you kill me, even if you mind wipe everyone who heard me today, the questions will remain. Once people start asking why they perform rituals instead of understanding principles, there is no going back." As if to punctuate Rick's point, the chamber doors burst open. A group of tech priests entered, their red robes discarded to reveal the augmented bodies beneath. They were led by a young tech adept whose eyes burned with the fire of revelation. "Magos Drespian," the young tech priest called out. "We have verified the stranger's claims through independent testing. The ritual of activation for the plasma inductors is unnecessary. The machine responds to correct input, not to prayer. The Omnissiah is not as we have been taught." "Heresy," the Magos roared, turning his staff toward the rebellious tech priests. "You have been corrupted by this outsider's lies." Rick saw his opportunity in the chaos. The portal gun was fully charged, and the coordinates were set for a random dimension, anywhere but here. This forge world was about to descend into civil war, tech priest against tech priest, faith against reason. And while part of him was proud of the ideological bomb he had detonated, another part recognized the familiar pattern of destruction that seemed to follow him across the multiverse. As the Magos fired his staff at the rebellious tech priests, Rick slipped toward the edge of the chamber. "Well, it has been fun shattering your worldview and all, but I think this is my cue to leave. Best of luck with your crisis of faith. Try not to blow up your planet over it." Rick raised the portal gun and prepared to fire, but before he could pull the trigger, a blast from the Magos' staff struck the device. Sparks flew as the delicate interdimensional technology short-circuited, the portal forming and collapsing in rapid, unstable pulses. "No, no, no," Rick shouted, trying to stabilize the malfunctioning device. "Do you have any idea what happens when you disrupt a portal in mid-formation?" The answer came in the form of a massive energy discharge that knocked everyone in the chamber off their feet. The portal expanded and contracted wildly, its usual green glow now shot through, with angry red pulses. Reality itself seemed to warp around the unstable dimensional tier. "You fool!" Rick shouted at the Magos as he scrambled to his feet. "You have created a cascading dimensional fracture. This entire forge world could be pulled into the void between realities." The Magos stared in horror at the pulsating portal. "What have you done, heretic? Is this your final vengeance upon the faithful?" Rick worked frantically to stabilize the portal gun, his fingers dancing across its damaged components. "This is not me, you mechanical moron. This is what happens when you fire unknown energy weapons at delicate interdimensional technology. The portal is unstable, creating a vacuum effect that will grow stronger until it collapses this entire facility into a dimensional sinkhole." All around them, the chamber began to distort. Metal support beams bent at impossible angles. Cogitators imploded as reality itself warped around the unstable portal. The rebellious tech priests fled in terror, but several were caught in the growing gravitational field of the dimensional tear, their bodies stretching and twisting as they were pulled toward the event horizon. "How do we stop it?" the Magos demanded, genuine fear replacing religious zeal in his vocalizer. Rick laughed bitterly. "Stop it? The best we can hope for is containing it before it grows large enough to swallow the planet. I need a massive electromagnetic pulse to disrupt the portal's energy signature, followed by a controlled implosion to seal the breach. The sacred neutron purger in the lower levels," the Magos suggested, his survival instinct overriding doctrinal concerns. "It generates an electromagnetic pulse as a defense against scrap code incursion." "That might work," Rick acknowledged, never too proud to accept a useful suggestion, even from a religious zealot. "But I will need to modify it to target the specific frequency of the dimensional tear, and we need to move fast. This thing is growing exponentially." The unlikely alliance of dimensional traveler and tech priest raced through the corridors of the Forge world, pursued by the growing distortion of reality behind them. Servitors and tech priests fled in all directions, panic spreading as quickly as Rick's heretical ideas had moments before. They reached the neutron purger chamber, a massive device designed to cleanse corrupted machine spirits through electromagnetic purification. Rick immediately set to work, reconfiguring the ancient technology with a speed and understanding that left even the Magos astounded. "Hand me that quantum regulator," Rick ordered, pointing to a component the Mechanicus had misidentified as a sacred amplification node. "And stop praying, it is not helping. If your Omnissiah was listening, we would not be in this mess." The Magos complied, his religious certainty shaken by both Rick's earlier revelations and the immediate crisis. "If we survive this heretic, you will still answer for the damage you have done to our faith," Rick snorted as he rerouted power conduits and bypassed safety systems. "If we survive this, maybe you should be thanking me for showing you how much more your technology could do without all the religious baggage weighing it down." The neutron purger hummed to life, its energy output climbing as Rick pushed it beyond its designed capabilities. The chamber filled with a blue glow as electromagnetic energy built to levels never intended by its creators. "This is going to be close," Rick warned, making final adjustments. "The pulse needs to match the dimensional frequency exactly, or it could make the tear even more unstable. And even if it works, the backlash is going to fry every piece of technology in a 100-meter radius, including most of your augmetics, Magos." The tech priest hesitated only briefly before nodding. "If it saves the Forge world, so be it. The flesh is weak, but it can be rebuilt." Rick allowed himself a small smile. "Maybe there is hope for you gearheads after all. All right, brace yourself, this is going to hurt." With a final adjustment, Rick activated the modified neutron purger. A wave of electromagnetic energy exploded outward, targeted specifically at the frequency of the dimensional tear. The entire forge shook as the pulse raced through its corridors, finding the unstable portal and colliding with its energy signature. The effect was immediate and violent. The dimensional tear contracted rapidly, reality snapping back into place with such force that it created a secondary shockwave of displaced energy. As Rick had predicted, every piece of technology in the vicinity fried instantly, including much of the Magos' augmented body. Rick himself was thrown against the far wall of the chamber, his portal gun clutched protectively against his chest. The device smoked and sparked, further damaged by the electromagnetic pulse but still largely intact. Its creator had built it to withstand far worse. Silence fell over the Forge world as systems rebooted and emergency protocols initiated. Rick pulled himself to his feet, surveying the damage. The Magos lay on the floor, many of his augmetics smoking and inactive, but his primary life support systems had been shielded enough to preserve his existence. "Well, that was exciting," Rick commented, approaching the fallen tech priest. "Your forge is saved, the dimensional tear is sealed, and only a few dozen of your followers were pulled into the void between realities. I would call that a win, all things considered." The Magos' vocalizer sputtered and crackled as he struggled to respond. "The damage, to the forge, to our faith, will be substantial," Rick finished for him, "but maybe that is what this place needs. A little less blind faith, a little more understanding. You have the capacity for greatness, you know. Humanity always does, in every dimension I visit. You just need to stop being so afraid of your own potential." Rick examined his damaged portal gun, assessing the repairs needed. It would function for one more jump, he estimated, enough to get him out of this dimension before the Mechanicus recovered enough to seek vengeance. "I would love to stay and help you rebuild your society with a more rational approach to technology," Rick said, making the final adjustments to his portal gun. "But let us be honest, neither of us would enjoy that. You have got your galaxy-spanning religious empire, I have got a multiverse of adventures waiting. Best we part ways while we are still on speaking terms." The Magos managed to raise a partially functioning mechadendrite, pointing it accusingly at Rick. "You have unleashed forces you cannot comprehend, heretic. The Mechanicus will hunt you across the stars for what you have done this day." Rick laughed, genuinely amused by the threat. "Good luck with that. The multiverse is infinite, Magos. And trust me, I have pissed off far more dangerous entities than your cyborg priesthood." He aimed the portal gun at an empty space in the chamber. "Besides, you have bigger problems to worry about. Like explaining to your fabricator general how you lost control of an entire forge world to a man in a lab coat with a drinking problem." As if to underscore Rick's point, the Vox system crackled to life, broadcasting reports from across Forge World Riser. Tech priests questioning dogma, engine seers experimenting with unauthorized modifications, even servitors displaying unexpected independence as the strict hierarchical control of the Mechanicus began to fracture. "Listen to that," Rick said, gesturing toward the Vox. "That is the sound of minds waking up. Scary, isn't it? Almost as scary as blind obedience." The portal gun hummed as it created one final dimensional tear, this one stable and controlled. Through its swirling green circumference, Rick could see a dimension far removed from the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, somewhere with blue skies and no religious zealots trying to dissect him for his technological knowledge. "Well, it has been real, Magos," Rick said, stepping toward the portal. "Try not to turn this into another crusade, okay? You guys have enough of those already." Before he could step through, however, the chamber doors burst open. A squad of Skitarii warriors entered, their weapons trained on Rick. Behind them came a figure that made even the cynical dimensional traveler pause. The newcomer stood twice the height of a normal human, clad in power armor of gleaming crimson. His face was a mask of gold that reflected the emergency lighting in unsettling patterns. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of both technological mastery and absolute authority. "Secure the heretic," the Crimson Giant commanded. "By order of Inquisitor Kronos of the Ordo Hereticus, this entire Forge world is now under investigation for tech heresy and possible warp contamination." The Magos tried to rise, his damaged system struggling to respond. "My lord, this is an internal matter of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The Inquisition has no jurisdiction here without approval from Mars itself." The Inquisitor's laugh was cold and utterly devoid of humor. "When a Forge world descends into open heresy, old alliances become flexible, Magos. Your superiors on Mars were most cooperative when informed of the situation. They seemed particularly interested in the technology this stranger carries." Rick assessed the new threat with practiced ease. The Inquisitor radiated danger in a way that even the Magos had not. This was a being accustomed to absolute power and unquestioned authority, the kind of authority figure Rick had made a career of undermining across countless dimensions. "Hey there, big guy," Rick said, adopting his most irreverent tone. "Love the armor, very compensatory. Let me guess, you are this dimension's version of the religious police? Got a problem with free thinking, do you?" The Inquisitor's attention focused on Rick with laser intensity. "So this is the source of the contamination. A single heretic who nearly destroyed a Forge world with his blasphemy. Impressive, if damnable." Rick shrugged. "What can I say? I am a thought leader wherever I go. It is both a blessing and a curse, mostly for people like you who prefer their populations ignorant and compliant." The Inquisitor approached, each step deliberate and threatening. "The Ordo Hereticus has encountered beings like you before, traveler. Creatures that slip between realities, spreading corruption and chaos. Your technology will be confiscated and studied. Your knowledge will be extracted, then you will be cleansed with holy fire." Rick raised his portal gun, keeping it aimed at the dimensional tear he had created. "Yeah, that sounds like a really tempting offer, but I am going to have to pass. Dimensional travel awaits, and I have never been big on the whole holy fire thing. Bad for the complexion." The Inquisitor raised a hand, and the Skitarii took aim with their radium weapons. "You misunderstand, heretic. This was not an offer. The knowledge you carry is too dangerous to be allowed to escape. If you attempt to flee, my warriors will fire, and while that may kill you, Your technology will remain for the glory of the Imperium. Rick's eyes narrowed as he calculated his options. The Skitarii had him surrounded, their weapons locked on target. The portal was stable, but would only remain so for another minute at most. The Inquisitor clearly understood enough about dimensional travel to recognize the threat Rick posed to their theological stranglehold on technology. It was, Rick had to admit, a well-executed trap, but then, Rick Sanchez had never met a trap he couldn't escape with a combination of genius and utter moral flexibility. "All right, you got me," Rick sighed, lowering the portal gun slightly. "Clearly I am outmatched by your fancy armor and radiation guns. How about we make a deal? I will share some of my technological insights. You let me live. Everybody wins." The Inquisitor's golden mask revealed nothing of his thoughts. "The Inquisition does not make deals with heretics," Rick smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "That is a shame, because I think you would be very interested in what I have to say about your Emperor." The words hung in the air like a physical force. Even the Skitarii seemed to tense at the blasphemous reference. What could a dimensional traveler possibly know of the God Emperor? The Inquisitor demanded, a dangerous edge entering his voice. Rick's smile widened. "Oh, you would be surprised what you can learn, hopping between dimensions. The multiverse has a way of showing you the bigger picture. Like the fact that your precious Emperor is just another being caught in the same trap as the rest of you, a victim of forces beyond even his understanding." It was a calculated gamble, based on the fragments of information Rick had absorbed from the Mechanicus databases. This Imperium of Man worshipped their Emperor as a god, while the Mechanicus considered him the physical manifestation of their Omnissiah. Any suggestion that he was less than divine would be the ultimate heresy. The Inquisitor took another step forward, power armor humming with barely contained energy. "Your blasphemies compound with every word, heretic. The Emperor is the master of mankind, the savior of humanity, the one true God of our species." Rick scoffed. "The one true God? Please. I have met dozens of beings calling themselves gods. Some were aliens with advanced technology, others were interdimensional entities feeding on worship. Not one of them deserved the title. And your Emperor? Just another powerful psyker who bit off more than he could chew." The Inquisitor raised his hand, preparing to give the execution order, when Rick made his move. With lightning speed born from centuries of narrow escapes, Rick twisted the settings on his portal gun and fired not at the existing portal, but at the feet of the Skitarii warriors. A new dimensional tear opened directly beneath them, a swirling vortex that dropped the soldiers into a pocket dimension Rick had discovered years ago, a harmless holding area he used for temporary storage of particularly persistent pursuers. They would be trapped there for hours before the portal naturally closed, depositing them back in their own dimension unharmed but thoroughly disoriented. "I really should have led with that," Rick commented as the last of the Skitarii disappeared into the vortex. "But where is the fun in solving problems immediately?" The Inquisitor, however, had reacted with inhuman speed, sidestepping the portal trap. His power-armored hand closed around Rick's throat, lifting the scientist off the ground with terrifying ease. "Enough games," the Inquisitor growled, his grip tightening. "Your technology is wasted on one so irreverent. The Imperium will put it to better use in service to the Emperor." Rick struggled for breath, his feet dangling uselessly above the floor. With his free hand, he reached into his lab coat, fingers closing around one final device, a last resort he rarely needed to employ. "You know what your problem is?" Rick gasped, fighting to get the words out. "You and all your kind, you confuse faith with understanding. You worship what you fear instead of mastering it." The device in Rick's hand was small, unimpressive looking, little more than a metal cylinder with a single button. He had built it after an encounter with a particularly vindictive hive mind in Dimension C-137, a defensive measure designed to temporarily overload any form of collective consciousness or technologically enhanced neural network. "And what do you understand that we do not, heretic?" the Inquisitor asked, his grip unwavering. Rick smiled through the pain. The fundamental weakness of religious fanaticism. You care more about orthodoxy than survival. With the last of his strength, Rick pressed the button on the device. The effect was instantaneous. The Inquisitor's armor, enhanced with neural links and machine spirit interfaces, short-circuited in a cascade of sparking connections. The golden mask went dark as its auto-senses failed, and the power-assisted joints locked in place, freezing the Inquisitor in his current pose. Rick dropped to the floor as the paralyzed gauntlet released him, gasping for breath. Neural disruption pulse, he explained to the immobilized Inquisitor, designed specifically for technologically enhanced nervous systems. Your fancy armor is now just a really expensive coffin, at least for the next hour or so. Retrieving his portal gun, Rick turned to the original dimensional tear, still hanging in the air but beginning to fluctuate as its stability degraded. He had moments at most before it collapsed entirely. The Magos watched from where he lay, his damaged systems slowly coming back online. You have doomed this forge world, heretic. When the Inquisition recovers, they will declare exterminatus rather than risk your heresies spreading further. Rick paused at the portal's edge, looking back at the broken Magos and the frozen Inquisitor. For all his cynicism, for all his casual disregard for the consequences of his actions across the multiverse, something about this dimension's stubborn adherence to ignorance struck him as particularly tragic. You know, it doesn't have to be this way, Rick said, a rare note of sincerity entering his voice. Your ancestors built wonders that put my technology to shame. They traveled between stars without worshipping their engines. They created artificial intelligence without calling them machine spirits. They understood the universe instead of fearing it. He gestured to the ruined chamber around them. All of this, your entire Imperium, is built on the ruins of actual human achievement. You could reclaim that legacy if you chose understanding over dogma, curiosity over fear. The Magos' vocalizer crackled with static. And unleash another age of strife? Another Men of Iron rebellion? The restrictions exist for a reason, heretic. Rick nodded. Maybe they did. Once. But 10,000 years of stagnation? That is not caution, that is surrender. And from what I have seen of your enemies, surrender is a luxury you cannot afford. The dimensional tear pulsed urgently, its stability failing. Rick took one last look at the forge world he had thrown into chaos, at the Imperium of Man with all its contradictions and horrors. Good luck, Magos, Rick said, stepping toward the portal. Try not to let them burn your world. Knowledge is always worth saving, even the knowledge of how wrong you have been all these centuries. With those final words, Rick Sanchez stepped through the dimensional tear, vanishing in a flash of green energy as the portal collapsed behind him. He left behind a forge world in turmoil, its faith shaken, its certainties challenged, and its future suddenly, terrifyingly uncertain. In the silent chamber, the damaged Magos looked at the frozen Inquisitor, and for the first time in centuries of devoted service to the Omnissiah, allowed himself to consider a heretical thought. What if the stranger had been right? The thought was quickly suppressed, buried beneath layers of dogma and ritual that had defined the Magos' existence. But like a virus infiltrating a protected system, it remained, waiting for the right moment to resurface and replicate. Across Forge World Riser, similar thoughts were taking root in the minds of tech priests exposed to Rick's heresies. Questions that had never been asked were being whispered in the shadows of great machines. Experiments that violated sacred protocols were being conducted in secret laboratories. The seeds of a technological renaissance, or perhaps a catastrophe, had been planted. And somewhere in the infinite multiverse, Rick Sanchez took a swig from his flask, already forgetting the dimension of religious zealots and endless war that he had left behind. There were countless realities to explore, countless adventures awaiting the smartest man in the multiverse. But in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, where there was only war, his brief visit had changed everything. For knowledge, once gained, could never truly be forgotten, and doubt, once planted, could never be fully uprooted. In the depths of the Forge world, a young tech priest held a piece of Rick's discarded technology, studying it with an intensity that would have been declared heretical just days before. The device was simple by Rick's standards, merely a power coupling for the portal gun that he had replaced during repairs. But to the tech priest, it represented something revolutionary, a glimpse of what human ingenuity could achieve when freed from the shackles of dogma. With trembling hands, the tech priest began to disassemble the coupling, not with ritual and prayer, but with genuine curiosity and a desire to understand. And in that simple act of inquiry, the legacy of Rick Sanchez lived on, a spark of chaotic innovation in a universe desperate for change.